I know that education can and should be a place where we don't just teach to a book. I felt like I was faced with two very difficult choices. I could either show up as best I could for 30 students and constantly go home feeling like I'm letting them down, or I could step away from the classroom and everything that I knew and show up for possibly less students, but hopefully give them that one-to-one support and make a little bit of a bigger impact. Prior to the pandemic, the role of tutoring felt really separate from the role of teaching. And I think it's wonderful right now, the space that we're in, because there seems to be a lot more acceptance and celebration of the role that tutors bring forward. I feel like the challenge right now is the balance between the catch-up culture and what I'm hoping will catch on, so spread the word, is the rest culture.
Hello and welcome to the Qualified Tutor Podcast, the podcast that brings you the latest in the world of tutoring, edtech and education, and hopefully inspires in you the big change that each and every one of us is capable of. Qualified Tutor is an industry-leading tutor training organisation and online tutoring community for thousands of tutors around the world. This podcast is the voice of this community, where we aim to hear from tutors, teachers, entrepreneurs, coaches, business experts, students, tutorpreneurs, and more from the world of tutoring about what inspires them every day, how they can help tutors like you, and what they've learnt about tutoring along the way. The question is, what will you learn today?
Hello and welcome to the 119th episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast. Today will be ever so slightly different to previous podcasts because this week is the week of the Love Tutoring Festival. And we are delighted to be welcoming on someone who has been and who will be taking a leading role at the festival throughout several events, and will also be leading the topic around today's episode, which is World Tutors Day, 2nd of July, which is taking place this coming Saturday. So a huge welcome to Sarah Lynn Hodder.
Thank you so much for having me, Ludo. I'm really excited to be on this podcast.
There are so many things we could talk about to do with Qualified Tutor. There's so many ways you have been involved with Qualified Tutor over the past 6 to 9 months or so. But today we want to talk about what World Tutors Day means and what that is. So just before we dive into that, a brief background for those of our listeners who haven't come across Sarah Lynn before. Sarah Lynn is the hub leader for was the hub leader for our hub, the Send and Wellbeing Hub. Sarah Lynn is also the founder of Bettering Youth, which is her wonderful tutoring business, a retired teacher as well, and a personal trainer. Sarah Lynn does a whole lot of things, and all of them are to the benefit of her students and those around her, always looking out for the well-being and the mental health of her students, her colleagues, and herself, of course. So really that fits in very nicely with the theme of World Tutors Day 2022, the Global Awareness Day for Tutoring and Tutors this year. So, Sarah Lynn, I think the first question really to dive into before we get into World Tutors Day itself is a little bit about you, a little bit about your background. And the way we love to do that here on this podcast is asking you about your why. So, Sarah Lynn, what is your why as a tutor?
I love this question. I always talk to my students about their why power, because I think your why is definitely what propels you forward. So I think on a subconscious level, I've always known that I would be an educator. I think my childhood and my experience with educators was a really big part in that decision. So as a child, I moved to 11 different schools before high school. And so my teachers played a really big role in helping me to acclimatize and to process moving so frequently. And it was also at school that I felt like I got a lot of extra pastoral support because I was a carer from a really young age. And so I believe that because I had the fortune of having such amazing people really allow me to lean on them, I knew that I wanted to be able to provide a very similar opportunity for others. I just didn't quite know how. I knew that I was really fortunate and not everyone would have that opportunity, but I thought more students needed it. So I went to school for my 5-year teaching degree, and then I confidently moved myself across the world from Canada to the UK. And very quickly, I realized that the demand often outweighs the capacity in the classroom. And I felt like I was faced with two very difficult choices. I could either show up as best I could for 30 students and constantly go home feeling like I'm letting them down, or I could step away from the classroom and everything that I knew and show up for possibly less students, but hopefully give them that one-to-one support and make a little bit of a bigger impact. And it took me a while to make that decision, but really it was my pastoral lead role in my last school that really helped me see that one-to-one really does have a lasting impact. I felt it myself, and I can see it in the students that I was working with. So that was my main reason that I confidently started bettering youth and left the classroom.
So do you think that why is something that developed, as you say, during that pastoral role at your previous school, or do you think that's something that has always lived within you?
I feel like my real why is because I know that education can and should be a place where we don't just teach to a book. And I think when I was in the schools that I was working at, I was really fortunate because I had the chance to experience a variety of different schools and had the support of a variety of different types of head teachers. But I think that my initial feeling that school should be and could be about more beyond the classroom has always been there. But I think that pastoral position really just gave me the confidence to know that it was a possibility.
Isn't it funny how those early ideas, sort of ingrained ideas, crystallize in the roles that we take as adults, even if we don't realize it at the time. So you've done so much for educators in your career as a professional, and it feels like over the last couple of years you've really stepped into that mentor role, leading others, leading the hub, leading Bettering Youth. Obviously you've been a personal trainer for some time now, and that very much is a role of leading and corralling and encouraging others, isn't it? And this year you've agreed to take on the kind of the promotional, the leadership role for World Tutors Day. And the initiative itself is very proud and very grateful to you for that. But I wonder if you could just give our listeners a bit of an idea about talking about your why. Why World Tutors Day? Why does tutoring need a global awareness day?
I think this is such a multifaceted question. So if I can kind of just break it down a little bit, I feel like that would be really helpful. Firstly, I absolutely adore the fact that we now have a Tutors Day that we can stamp into the calendar. I think it's really appropriate. Globally right now, there's a big shift in the mindset towards the role of tutors. Prior to the pandemic, the role of tutoring felt really separate from the role of teaching. Even as a teacher, I never really considered moving into the tutoring space until I was kind of faced with that decision. And I even had parents come to me when I was starting my tutoring company and say, look, I really want to work with you. We really want you to tutor our child, but they would never dare admit it to the school. There was such like a belief there that it was almost offensive or it was undermining the school. And I think it's wonderful right now, the space that we're in, because there seems to be a lot more acceptance and celebration of the role that tutors bring forward. We've seen the support of thousands of tutors through the National Tutoring Program here, specifically in the UK. It's actually allowed over 1.5 million tutoring courses to start since 2020. 1.5 million. And that's just because of the support of tutors being celebrated and acknowledged and welcomed. So this day really does celebrate the education that can and should be delivered in a variety of different ways, through a variety of different avenues, by a variety of different specialists. So I think that's like the global approach. As a professional body, tutors, we are really benefiting from this global awareness because it's helping to elevate our role, not only to celebrate the efforts, but also to make it more accessible. There might be a lot of different individuals who are sitting on the sidelines thinking about joining this profession, but not necessarily knowing if it will sustain their livelihood or if who they can turn to, because there's not really a staff room. And for the longest time, there weren't really high standards that everyone needed to abide by or pull themselves up to. So I think having this day dedicated to tutors of the world, I believe it further echoes all of the advancements that we are making as a profession over the past couple of years. And then if I could add, for me personally, this day specifically, like the second World Tutors Day, following on our first full year back to school with exams, I was really excited, actually, when I was asked to develop something. When speaking to tutors as the well-being lead for Qualified Tutor, I hear very similar comments constantly. I feel burned out. It's been nonstop. I sometimes feel alone. And who do I know? Like, who can I turn to? I feel like everyone feels like a competitor. Those are very common threads of inquiry that I keep hearing. And so to be able to create an event that provides time to actively participate in self-care, for showcasing how this profession is really interconnected and it can be really welcoming, and ultimately to help facilitate great relationships amongst individuals, I really do feel honored. So I hope that it creates, this big board of honoring the humanists that we all have.
What a fantastic point to end on there. I mean, I think with the rise in technology in tutoring, some of it, our hands being forced by the pandemic, there was a threat potentially that humanity and humans may be lost from education. And what we know as tutoring professionals and education professionals is that is the key link to creating the connection with a student, isn't it?
Only way. It really is the only way. It's like, it's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need to feel connected before we'll be able to do that self-actualization. Yeah.
And what better way in a world where we do work from our computers still to feel that connection than to hear from thousands of tutors around the world, literally tutors who you would never have come across if it wasn't for the computer, and you can share those insights with them. And not only can we share insights, we can actually share, day-to-day challenges, day-to-day activities that we do. How is that tied into this year's challenge?
So we're about halfway through 2022, as you know, and I feel like the challenge right now is the balance between the catch-up culture and what I'm hoping will catch on, so spread the word, is the rest culture. Because for so long, we live in this fast-paced world. We're always striving towards the future. As a society, we're looking to bridge the gap, prepare for the next revolution. As educators, we're always looking to the future and planning accordingly. As tutors, we're doing the same, but we're also adding an extra layer of looking at our sustainability as a business. There's always something on the to-do list, and we always seem to be running out of time. So having spent the last 2 and a bit years in a heightened state of being, I don't think our bodies have caught up yet. I feel like we're still dealing with increased levels of cortisol, which is impacting our health and our sleep cycles and our immune system. There's still a threat to our immune system. There are various external world events that are pulling our attention in 100 different directions. And yet we're still constantly going for that grind. We're not putting in the rest. And so it makes complete sense to me when parents come to me and they're breaking down and they're telling me how low their children's mental well-being is. And it makes sense to me that tutors are messaging me for well-being support because they're feeling burned out and they have nowhere else to go. And it makes sense to me that everyone is living for the weekend and just craving that rest. To me, it's like we've ran a marathon and then we've just jumped in the water without any idea of where land is. We're just going to keep swimming. Like we're actually just causing more and more overwhelm for ourselves by not pausing and planning and reflecting. And so I think our biggest obstacle is acknowledging, like, hey, we are human. We are not an energized bunny. We will have a moment where we will need to pause and honor our well-being, because without it, then we can't continue showing up. We can't continue to push this profession to the highest standards. We can't continue supporting the next generation if we're not modeling it ourselves.
And we can't keep turning up and doing the best for the students that we work with, can we? If we are not functioning.
Absolutely.
So we will see some pretty incredible tutoring sessions on Sunday, the 3rd of July, I believe, the day after World Tutors Day.
Best ones to come.
Exactly, yeah. So do you mind telling our listeners, and hopefully everyone who's going to partake in World Tutors Day 2022, about the challenge that we have set people for Saturday, the 2nd of July?
Absolutely. I'm so excited for this one. So we've already mentioned that it's going to be grounded in well-being. And so the belief is that if we can take care of our mind, our body, and our being, then we can show up to be our best selves. And so we are looking for 2 activities, because it's the 2nd World Tutor Day, 2 activities, 20 minutes each. One that will be about honoring your well-being for your mind. And then the second one will be about honoring the well-being for your body. And then we added a little cheeky bonus of encouraging you to be outside for a minimum of 22 minutes, because it's 2022. And being outside helps to release those positive vitamins and endorphins. So that is your 3-step challenge. Okay, so you can be thinking up your challenges that you're going to be partaking in on Saturday, the 2nd of July. And I believe, Sarah-Lynn, that we will be encouraging tutors and really anyone who takes part. This challenge is not just for tutors. It's just celebrating the world of tutoring. This can be children, parents, friends, colleagues, whoever, to be posting your examples and photos and videos from your challenges with the hashtag World Tutors Day and World Tutors Day 2022. So plenty of ways for you to see other people's activities, get some ideas, but also to celebrate yourself. And as Sarah-Lynn says, to honor your own well-being. I don't think this should be a day where you should feel guilty about going for a run or showing off that you've been able to do this or that, I think it's really about sharing those ideas. So Sarah-Lynn herself came up with this challenge. She's far too modest to say that, but I think it's a wonderful challenge. 2 20-minute activities and a minimum of 22 minutes outside in the open, hopefully in the sun, wherever you are in the world. If you're in the UK, I think you might be lucky. We may well have beautiful sunshine for the entire weekend. So, Sarah-Lynn, just looking then at really this, I guess it's probably become a bit of a buzzword, this word mindfulness, and it means lots of different things to different people. But what does mindfulness in tutoring mean to you, Sarah-Lynn? If I could explore that with an example, Ludo, I think that might be one of the best ways that I could explain it, because you're so right. It means different things to different people. But yesterday, actually, I had one of my students show up and he looked ghostly, absolutely just white as a ghost. And he had mentioned that he had already written 3 exams that day, and he still had 2 more to write the next day. And at first I was like, oh my goodness, why are you still here? And I was shocked that his parents still brought him to our session, because sometimes, families will say it's too much and they pull back because they worry about it being too much. But to be honest, I was so honored. I was so honored that this parent knew that bettering youth was all about blending well-being into our sessions. And she really did trust that we wouldn't do business as usual, and that we would tailor the session to what that child needed in the moment. And so that's what we did. I immediately brought out the games, and we spent time playing and chatting and talking through the emotions of the exams and getting his mindset right about the future exams, all while playing some math games. And so for him, he was like, this is the best session ever. We're just hanging out. We're sitting on the floor. We're playing games. But to me, as an educator, I'm thinking, perfect. We're cementing his mental maths. We're practicing retrieval of past learning. We're looking at problem solving in creative ways. So I felt like in that instance, everyone won. But really what was going on, I think, was something much bigger than that. We were actually showing him that even though he feels overwhelmed or tired, and he's at a point where he would normally probably just completely sign off of everything and just go play PlayStation, we showed him that being tired doesn't mean you have to check out 100%. You really can look at the intensity of what you have to do and change it. It means that you can pivot the methodology to make sure that you're enjoying it, or you're taking it on board in a different way. So you're keeping your mind and your mental well-being in mind. So mindfulness, I guess, to me in tutoring means being aware of the current headspace, encouraging and modeling conversations around emotions, but then also being able to provide skills that will support them both within, but also beyond the classroom.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's the best definition of mindfulness I've ever heard. And with the example as well, I think that really consolidates it in the mind of a tutor, especially. That example we've all lived through as tutors, hundreds of times. The student who, for whatever reason, is not in the mental state that is necessary for effective learning. And that's a great way around it. So you've solved lots of tutors' problems in one fell swoop.
Games out.
Now, just bringing this conversation to close, I've really, really enjoyed this conversation, because World Tutors Day means a lot to me. And you've taken what Julia Silva and I launched during the first World Tutors Day in 2021. You've taken it up at the next level. And I think the focus on mindfulness is so vital in where we are now, the summer of 2022, after 2 long, hard years. So with that in mind, and looking ahead, which we always like to do at the end of an episode, what do you hope then is the legacy of World Tutors Day?
Yeah, I think the legacy for World Tutors Day is all about connectivity. So we're at a time right now when, as a society, we're focusing on what's different and we're trying to label it. And I think that that's where we're coming from with the dichotomy between teachers and tutors. And my hope is that World Tutors Day will erase some of those lines that are drawn in the sand, and they will really help people to feel more connected. Being part of a community is incredibly powerful for our well-being, our professional development, our personal growth. So for me, at the end of the day, I would hope that World Tutors Day acts as a flagship, as a marker that will allow tutors to feel welcome to the profession and encouraged to come to a profession that is making huge leaps and bounds to create a profession that is holding itself to a very high standard, but also there for one another as well.
What more could we hope for than a profession that at the same time moves forward in its professionalism and keeps that up with well-being and tutors looking out for other tutors, which perhaps other professions that have moved very quickly maybe haven't done quite so well. So I think the flag that you're flying, the drum that you're beating, Sarah Lynn, is absolutely the right one. So a massive gratitude to you for taking this on and for spreading that message to not only myself, but certainly so many members of the Qualified Tutor team. I think your energy, as listeners, you can hear already just from this audio, display of Sarah Lynn's energy. You can really hear that coming across. So listeners, your next step is to go to worldtutorsday.org. Simply type that in your search bar. Check out the challenge for this year. Make sure that you'll keep yourselves free on Saturday, July the 2nd. That'll be the day after the Love Tutoring Festival ends, for a little wind down after a long week of the festival, and a chance for you to connect with other tutors in a way that's different to how you might have connected with tutors in the past, which is professionally. This is much more in a well-being kind of personal capacity. But Sarah Lynn, thank you very, very much for that.
I'm grateful.
And I know some of you listeners will want to catch up with Sarah Lynn. You can do so within the community or via the email wellbeing@qualifiedtutor.org. Both of those links will be in the show notes below. Sarah Lynn, thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you. You enjoy some sunshine.
Enjoy the sunshine, exactly.
Yes.
And what a wonderful week it's been already with the festival, and some really cool events to come as well. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast. Whether you're a regular listener of this podcast or you've just stumbled across it, join the Qualified Tutor Podcast group within the Qualified Tutor community to stay up to date with our latest news, offers, workshops, and of course, simply to meet other tutors like you. Whatever your level as a tutor, our training courses will be the next step in your professional development. Visit qualifiedtutor.org/training to find out more about our CPD accredited and Ofqual recognised courses, the first of their kind in the tutoring industry. Your student deserves the best tutor possible. Make that happen today by joining Qualified Tutor